the expenses are pretty low. And if you're driving it yourself, it's fuel and repair and maintenance. And those ones where you're driving a business yourself, I see it between 60 and like 80% margin, which that basically doesn't exist in most
transportation.
Spaces. In transportation, yeah. So this is a space where you don't have to use a bank. You don't have to bring your own bank. Biggest things you can take as confidence as a buyer coming in is that the actual bakery, the provider of all of this, believes in this model enough that they finance it themselves.
What are the weekly kind of responsibilities of the bread route owner?
Deliver bread. This is Josh Gregory, Vice President of Operations at Route Consultant, and you are now watching Truck and Hustle.
All right, so you are the Vice President of Route Consultant. You guys are friends to the show. You have been here before, so good to see you. This is my first time meeting you, though, Josh. So great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you as well.
For the listeners and the people who are viewing this who aren't familiar with Route Consultant, can you tell us what you guys do?
Yeah, we do a couple things. So way back when we got started, our original owner, Spencer Patton, was one of the largest FedEx contractors in the country. And that's a whole other path we can go down of what FedEx contracting is if we need to. But when he was in the space, got really large, and what he saw was that there was a really big gap in terms of people who are coming into the space, not understanding the right way to get in, not understanding the right way to be profitable, to be successful. And there really wasn't a good space for people to go and learn, to find a good business, to pay the right price for a business. And so while he was still an operator, he spun up this whole side of the business, Route Consultant, as it was then. We've been operating for over a decade now, but it's in part just a small business brokerage where we help buy and sell businesses, help get fair valuations. So when people come into the space, they can pay the right price, and then we'll help them through the process from beginning to end. But one of the most important things from day one that he wanted to make sure was core to who we are and continues to be is that beyond just buying and selling, we wanted to make sure to focus on education and training and really helping people's their first steps into the space be successful. Because what we saw was, and this still exists, unfortunately, is there's tons of people out there who will tell you what they say a business is worth. And it's, people will pay 2, 3, 4 times what they really should be paying. And in the first year or two, they come in, they struggle, and then ultimately fail. And then we're trying to help them pick up the pieces, where what we'd really like you to do is set you up from day one to pay the right price, come in, be successful, and then help you with the operations once you're in the business. So that's where we started, was FedEx, and we've grown since then. We focus on FedEx, Amazon, bread, EMS, and waste, and then there's a few others that we look at as well. But we've kind of expanded and taken all of those things that we've learned about the logistics in the last mile space and tried to help find ways for entrepreneurs to be successful, because it's hard enough as it is to be an entrepreneur in anything. So we're trying to help, as you come in, make sure that you avoid all the roadblocks, avoid all the pitfalls, and really be successful as you get into the space. Okay.
And I'd love to talk about some of those roadblocks and pitfalls, and especially like valuation, right? I think that's a really good conversation to have. But first, before we do that, the term routes. So you just now named a few different types of route. Kind of tell us like the etymology of that word, kind of where that comes from and what that means.
Yeah, there's a lot of things there. And every space uses it a little bit differently. But at the simplest, when we're talking about a route, it's a truck and a driver. In the FedEx space, that's all of the packages you deliver is a route. You got a truck full of FedEx packages, a driver that drives it and delivers all those packages on the stop. Same for the Amazon world. They're really similar. In the bread space, it's you own a territory. A route would be all of the stops that you make in that territory. EMS is a little bit different. You would refer to it as kind of the ambulance and all of the stops that one ambulance makes. But in general, in all of these, it's a truck and a driver. A resource is how we think about a route. And then we try to quantify things in those terms and make sure that you understand how profitable a route should be, what a route's worth in each of these spaces, and how that translates to an overall business.
Okay. And these businesses are bought and sold. Were they at one point inherited? Like how does that kind of work, and what's some of the changes that's happened in the industry? All right, y'all, quick word from our sponsor. Discover the hassle-free trailer leasing experience with Paramount Trailer Leasing, a family-owned business based out of the greater Fort Worth area. With more than 30 years of industry experience, they offer a range of high-quality trailers from flatbeds to dry vans and specialized models designed to meet all of your transportation needs. Enjoy flexible lease terms, competitive rates, and a same-day simple leasing process that requires no credit checks and guarantees trailers with no recap tires. Just fill out an online application, have your lease agreement prepared, receive a call to arrange pickup, sign the agreement, hook up, and get on the road all in one day. Visit ParamountTrailerLeasing.com today, and also you get free breaks for the lifetime of your lease just by mentioning Truck and Hustle. All right, y'all, let's go.
There's some of that in all of these. So there are, in particular, in some of the EMS and the waste space, which is those are a little bit new for us in terms of the way that we are coming into the space, because beyond just buying and selling, those are ones we're actually helping people start up their own businesses and really get in with nothing, build their brand, build their marketing, and take over an area. So those are a little bit different. You know, those are building a non-existent territory and coming in. But most of these in the FedEx and Amazon world are the only way that they transact hands is when you're actually sold in a public marketplace, or a lot of times it's kind of in private, where you just go to the guy next to you on the line and say, hey, you know, buy my routes for X amount, and probably not what it's really worth. And we saw a lot of that of people who didn't understand what it was worth and sold it for pretty low amounts compared to what, you know, these are multi-million-dollar businesses.
Yeah.
In the bread space, though, a lot of people view those as family businesses, that those contracts are really different than what you see in a lot of these other spaces where you own those areas. So you work for a bakery. We can go into the details of how that distribution model works in a second, but those contracts, you really own it. And you get the product from the bakeries, but you have that territory for as long as you want it. You can pass it on to your sons and daughters for as long as you want to. And that's how a lot of people have treated that. And I think that's also why there's a lot of contractors who they have their one route in the bread space, and that's what they've had for, you know, generations. And they don't think about it as anything more than what that is. But there's so much more potential for growth and owning multiple routes and the size and scale for what this world can be. And there are contractors doing that, but I think there's only, you know, a few compared to what everyone should be thinking about and what it could mean for that space.
Got it. And what made Route Consultant interested in the bread space, and how did you guys first kind of get into that industry?
So there's a lot of similarities between bread and FedEx. So, you know, we've always kept our eyes open to, you know, what other opportunities are there? Where can we kind of use the same resources and knowledge that we've brought to the FedEx space? But there was a guy who essentially watched our content and was so fascinated by what we had done in the FedEx space that came to our office and basically beat down our doors until we let him in and gave him a meeting with Spencer to talk about the bread space, because that's what he's from. That's what his world was. And he saw everything that we did and kind of the leveling up and the professional acumen that we added to the FedEx space, and saw what really the bread space is, kind of like FedEx 20 years ago, where there's a lot of really small contractors and mainly just owner operators that don't have a lot of or don't have as much business acumen, or aren't thinking of this as a 5, 10, 15 route possibility. And he wanted to find ways to both add that to the space that he was already in, and to find ways to, you know, provide unifying events or ways that people can come together and learn best practices. I think that's always something that's tough in an entrepreneur space, is you know what you're doing and you kind of feel what's hard for you, but you don't know what, if you're crazy, if that is the same problems everybody else has, or if it's something that's been solved by 100 other people and you just don't know it yet. So we tried to do that for the FedEx space, to provide a unifying community with events, with our online knowledge bases and all of the courses we provide, to where you can learn and find those. And that guy basically forced us to see bread as an opportunity there. So that's really what brought us in. And that was 3 or 4 years ago now. And we've grown a lot in this space since then, I'd say.
Okay. Do you guys work closely with the bread distributors at all? Or is it more so just the buyers and the sellers of the routes?
Yeah. So we, more than any of the other spaces we found a real openness from bakeries themselves. So the actual FedEx and Amazons of the world. But for the bread world, the bakeries are the ones providing the goods. And we found a real openness working with them to find ways to, have a ton of route opportunities and to find ways to be able to service the entire communities that we've seen, and that they'll allow us to talk directly to the entire distributor network and find ways where, any routes that are up for sale from one of those bakeries, they'll basically come through us and we can provide in the open market. So I would say it's a really positive interaction because those bakeries are just focused on making bread at the end of the day. Like that's what they're good at. That's what they know how to do. And they see us as true partners and finding ways to help all of their distributors become more successful. And they want to empower their distributors to be more successful, but they just can't because of the nature of contractor relations, where there's only so much they can do to step in because they can't treat them as employees. But they would love to be able to help them. And so I think there's a real positive momentum there from the bakeries in a way that I haven't seen in some other spaces.
Got it. And for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with what a bread route is, can you kind of break it down for us? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple.
I like that.
Yeah, thankfully. Yeah, it's what I like too. So basically what happens, bakeries will, the Bimbo, the Flowers, the Missions, the Pepperidge Farms of the world are just making product. And what they'll do is they will ship that product out to kind of local terminals, depots. And if you are an independent distributor, you own all of the zip codes, or you own all of the stops in a certain zip code. So, if you had East Philly and it would be defined by, to the detail of like each street that you have, and you'll know exactly what your territory is.
As a distributor.
Yeah, as a distributor. And so you will own all of those territories. So if there's a Walmart in there, if there's a Publix in there, if there's a school, anything in there is yours to deliver to. And most of those big box stores already have contracts with those bakeries. So all you're really doing is picking up the product at the depot and just delivering it to the stops in your territory. And so you usually get there pretty early in the morning because you got to make sure to get the product on the shelves before everybody gets into the stores and before everybody's showing up at the bakery. So you're not doing a ton of stops. You're really just going to these depots. You're getting all the product. You're going to Walmart. You're going to your delis, dropping off the product, making sure that you are arranging it in stores so that you're handling any of the stale product that's on the shelves, pulling it off, rotating it to make it all look nice and pretty. And then that route is really not anything more than that. So it's pretty simple. But the interesting thing is you own all the stops that are there. And when you buy a business, you are buying all of those stops that are there. But if they build a new Walmart in that area, or if they build anything in that area, it's automatically yours as well. Or if there's a deli that's not buying from your bakery, you can go to that deli, be like, hey, you want to buy, if you work out a way for them to buy bread from your bakery, it's additional revenue that you can add to your territory. So you've got the base stuff, all of the big box stores that is a good amount of revenue. And then you can always find ways to add additional revenue. So it's a really nice steady base where you're partnering with some of the biggest companies and biggest bakeries in the country. And then you're adding the incremental revenue whenever you find ways. So it's a way to have, something like a franchise where you're partnering with a really big brand and big name, but none of the royalty fees, and you can find ways to add additional growth. So it's a really nice partnership without it's very few moving parts like we just talked about there.
Got it. So I guess that's kind of how you scale the business and grow it, right? How do you make this to where it's not a job and it's a business? I think that's what people want to really know about.
A really big difference between what is and what can be. So most people, when they still think about bread, they think about it as this is a route. That's all it is. It's a job. I have to work it basically every day, no really time off. I know plenty of people who only own one route and they've just hired a driver who does it. So you won't make as much money doing that.
Yeah.
But there are people who do it that way, even with just one route. But what I would say is we've seen a large number of contractors. Well, I wouldn't say large. There are more than you would think that have found ways to operate at 5, 10, 15, 20 routes And it's just that nobody really knows about it. No one's really talking about it. And previously, there's a lot of bakeries that didn't really support it and weren't really open to it. But the hardest thing is getting out of your head of thinking that this can only be something that I operate myself. I think from a numbers perspective, there's just a couple of things to think about. So these businesses, when we really got into them, the way it works is you'll see them advertised as kind of the top line revenue, which is the sales of all of the products in the territory. The way you get paid is a percentage of that revenue. So
okay, give me a number, like what that may look like.
It's usually like 15 to 20% is what the commission rate is. And so, if it was a $1 million business, it's 150 to 200,000 of that $1 million in revenue is what you're actually making in a year.
Okay.
The expenses are pretty low. We're talking fuel, and if you're driving it yourself, it's fuel and repair and maintenance. And those ones where you're driving a business yourself, I see it between 60 and like 80% margin, which that basically doesn't exist in most
transportation.
Spaces. In transportation, yeah. So I think there's that metric alone points to the fact that there's you can do a lot wrong and you have a big margin to work with. And so I think that's part of what makes this, where as you scale, as you add things like additional drivers, as you add part-time drivers, a manager, you've got a lot of margin to work with. And so we've actually seen the businesses that are some of the most successful in this space are when they get to about 10 to 15 routes. There's one of the bakeries we've worked with that's done an analysis of all of their operators, and it was those that are getting up into the higher route counts that are actually far more productive, far more profitable than some of their smaller ones. And so they're seeing this and kind of like, how do we get our contractors to, one, know this is an option, and two, find ways to be successful when we get there. And so a lot of what we're doing now is helping kind of paint that path for operational success as a multi-route operator.
So you just said like the 10 to 15 routes before, you said the bakeries weren't really open to that.
Yeah.
Why? What changed?
So part of it is that I think there's just kind of a fear of letting people do something different than what they've always done. It's always been an owner-operator model where the one guy's in charge of their one truck, and so who is at fault if anything happens. But as you get a little bit bigger, then there may be a guy you don't see as often because he's got drivers instead of being the owner that's in the territory. And so
they like that familiarity and that personal touch.
Well, and it's just
traditionally
it's tradition. That's the thing, is this is the way we've always done it. So that's what we're always going to do. But I think there's been a realization in some of those bakeries as they try to find ways to continue to be more profitable at the top line. Like, how are we going to make this work? And then you look at your distributor network and you see that the ones that are doing the best, that are the most open to growth and really changing and keeping up with the way the world is changing, the technology that comes with it, are the ones that are getting a little bit larger, where they can pull back and they don't have to be as in the weeds on, I got to make sure my Walmart is good today and the store manager is kind of annoying in the mornings. Like, you can think about the whole business, and you can think about profitability, and you can think about the ways to grow and change, but you can't do that when you're just an owner operator. And I think they're realizing that. And there was even a point probably 7 or 8 years ago where they let people get larger without finding good ways to help them be successful as they got larger. And it was just a bunch of guys that were used to being owner operators but didn't have any path to figure out how to be business operators at scale. And so some of them had some problems there. And I think what we're working on now is a realization that that's how you really make a lot of money. And that's how you scale to have, 7-figure revenue and really high, we're talking the 300, 400, 500 plus in margin that you're making every year. But those businesses need someone who can come in and treat it as a business, not just a job. And so that's a lot of what we're kind of working through and coaching on right now.
What are some of the typical operational challenges?
One of the biggest ones as you scale, especially, is having a part-time or vacation guy. This is a business where you really don't have any kind of time off. And so if you've only got one route, if you got trying to have a part-timer or a vacation guy is like, it's tough, who like to find the payroll for somebody to come in as a second driver on a smaller margin.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of guys that there's people who do just vacation routes that we can point you to, but there's also a couple of things we're working on the technology side there to help with that as well. But again, as you continue to scale, you can have a part-timer. I would say some of the challenges is just not knowing how to properly order on the bread side. So
I'd love to expound on that.
Yeah. Part of the nuance and part of the, kind of the local level knowledge that you'll have about a business is knowing, on this day of the week, what are the types of products that get ordered the most? Or every June, I know that in the middle of June, there's a hit of a bunch of different products. We're just preparing for things like the 4th of July of having your hot dogs or hot dog buns ready. So keeping up with things like that and knowing individual information about your territory, because you'll have some historical info from a bakery, but what you're trying to do is combine historical info with your kind of street level knowledge and kind of predicting what you think are the best, products to have on the shelves and ordering in advance. And then using that technology, I find that several of the bakeries have rolled out new technology without a ton of help on the kind of helping their contractors use it properly and just kind of hoping they figured it out, and it hasn't always translated. And so I think this is a space that as technology continues to come to it, there will be more of the optimization and forecasting that you can do around ordering, because it's one of the only real nuances when it comes to being successful here is having the right amount of product at the right time in the right place.
Okay. So your responsibility as the route owner is to make sure you have to forecast the amount of bread you're going to, or like, how does that work? Can you give me go a little bit deeper into that? Like what are my responsibilities? Because what type of metrics am I looking at you said there's some historical data, but what's the real time data that I'm looking at every day to know how to order? Can I over order? Can I under order? How does that impact the store's supply chain? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you can do all of that, unfortunately. So what you're trying to do is at minimum, make sure that you've got product on the shelves at all times. And some of the companies like Walmart have really specific KPIs for how much bread there can be. And if you're, missing stock on any given day, you can be hit. Like Walmart has its own KPIs that are fun to deal with.
Okay.
But what you're trying to do is if you under order, so you don't order enough, you can shift product. Like let's say you have one store that you over ordered a little bit. You can move product around and try to even out your stuff. And especially as you scale, you might have more opportunity there to shift product as you need to around your stops. But you're looking at your data and you're trying to balance what the bakery is telling you, how many you need to order with what you know and what you're seeing. Because the other thing that you have to kind of check in real time is there are typically at least one merchandiser. It could be the owner, it could be the driver, who essentially goes and rechecks, in the late afternoon or maybe on a Wednesday or a day that you aren't doing as much delivery to see, are the shelves empty, or is there any stale product that we need to pull off? That they'll kind of do a double check on certain days. So really what you're trying to do is just make sure that you're staying on top of, and kind of combining the data that you're getting from a forecast level of just, this is what we expect you to have, with just kind of some surface level knowledge of the territory and the people in it to be successful. So in real time, it's more just you're tracking what each store has and tracking, how it's doing, but there's not a ton of there's not a ton of technology that you're tracking all these different KPIs. It's really just, do I have enough bread or not?
Okay.
Or too much?
Got you. And I'm, as the route owner, am I buying this bread from the bakery and then giving it to the retailer? How does the flow of money work?
Some bakeries do it differently. Some will you don't buy it, so you just get paid a percentage of what you sell.
Okay.
Some will basically have a balance that you'll spend and essentially get paid back the difference. So you'll buy it at a wholesale rate, buy it, and it'll be like a negative on your balance. And when it sells in the stores, it'll be a positive. So it'll sell at a higher price than what you bought it for, and you'll kind of get the difference. So there are different ways, but most people are moving now to where you don't buy the bread up front. And you're just paid a percentage of the sales.
Okay. And then when I actually make the delivery, how am I getting paid?
So there will be a kind of a weekly payment from the bakeries themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
From the bakery or from the retailer who's selling
bakeries.
it? So the bakery selling doing that, and that's like usually like a net 7 payment. You get paid every week.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right, so we said typical margins could be anywhere from 60 to 80%.
I'd say 60 to 80 is if you're driving.
Okay.
So if you're not driving, it's going to end up closer to 20 or 30. But what you've got there is very few expenses. Like I said, the only real things you're paying for: insurance, payroll, fuel, and if you have a driver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the startup.
Yeah.
I buy the route.
Yep.
Right. And now I'm the owner of the route. What are my costs? What costs do I incur initially? Yeah. And then what does startup look like? How do I transition into that role to take over the route?
Yeah. I mean, the important first kind of backup step there is, we talk about buying. This is a space where you don't have to use a bank. You don't have to bring your own bank. Almost all of these bakeries will finance it for you. So they'll come in and I think that's one of the biggest things that you can take as confidence as a buyer coming in is that the actual bakery, the provider of all of this, believes in this model enough that they finance it themselves, and they'll do it. They'll do a credit check essentially, but beyond that, they will provide financing. You only need 10% down.
Okay.
And so for any of those routes, you're coming in at a pretty low price point. You come in, and the only other startup is if there's no vehicle as a part of the purchase. Some will come with it, some won't. You don't have to have in this space like a brand new 2025 fancy vehicle. This is something where there's not a ton of requirements on what the vehicle has outside of the space to hold the bread. Got you.
Yeah. Are there any compliance things that you may need, like a commercial license plate or anything like that?
Yeah,
like
you need a DOT number.
Okay.
And you do need commercial insurance. You need general liability insurance and workers' comp insurance as well. But other than that, there's not a lot of hoops to jump through. And if you're buying, you will kind of have a training period with most of these bakeries where they'll kind of introduce you to the route, even if you're buying, where you'll kind of go through an interview process that will help with as well.
Okay. So you said the bakery will finance the route. What are the typical terms that you guys see out there with financing?
Usually as high as 10 years.
Okay.
A little bit higher interest rate. Because they're financing it for you. I'd say anywhere from like 10 to 12 is what we're seeing right now. But it's something where you don't have to do a ton of different, you don't have to go to an SBA and explain how all of this works and have like a lien on your house or anything like that. This is something where the bakery is it's a little bit higher interest rate, but it's 10 years and it's a pretty nice cash flow opportunity.
What type of interest are we talking about?
What type of interest?
The interest rate, you said it's a little higher.
Like 10 to 12%.
10 to 12%. Yeah. Okay, got it. You said over 10 years? Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. So what are the weekly kind of responsibilities of the bread route owner?
Deliver bread. I mean, the biggest things are delivering the bread and then making sure that the shelves stay stocked and that they've got the right product in the right place. So the other kind of things that you're doing during the week are finding opportunities to meet with like the store managers at a big box stores like Walmart, and seeing if there's opportunities to have display stands in certain areas or at certain times. A lot of those displays are like the actual space in the store is just subject to how the store manager wants to organize it. And so a lot of times if you can have a good relationship and you can kind of explain, I'll have this stocked, this is going to be a great opportunity, we've got a sale coming up, whatever it is, you can get those display stands in the store and get a lot of extra revenue and volume. You just have to make sure that if you've gone out on a limb to go to the store manager and they give you a stand, that stand is always stocked and always ready. So you might have to come in a little bit more often, maybe in the afternoons, like I was talking about with the merchandiser, to make sure that if you got a special stand in a high traffic area, that you make sure that the bread's always on it.
Got it. What about any type of reporting? Are you reporting up to anybody? Any KPIs that anybody's looking for? Anything like that? Or is it kind of self?
Yeah. So beyond just making sure the shelves are stocked, there's stale percentages and shrink. So those are two of the two terms.
What are they?
Stale and shrink. So
can you explain those?
Yeah. So stale is typically just they'll set a percentage, and you can't have more than 3% of your product is stale.
And who determines that?
The bakery.
Okay.
So like whenever you have stale product that you return, they will basically not not counted against you if you're below that threshold. But once you get above whatever the stale threshold is that they set, then there will be, they basically won't buy it back from you.
What does that mean? What does that indicate? What is that indicating if you have this high stale percentage?
Yeah, so think about it this way. If you're putting this bread on the shelves and you're not doing a good job of rotating it or having the fresh, you want to make sure that the stale gets purchased. If it doesn't, then it's a waste of product. It's a waste of the bread. It only stays fresh for a certain amount of time. And actually, we're in a world now. I don't know if you've seen any of those apps that, scan the ingredients.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of bread companies that did a lot to make bread that would last longer on the shelves as like an experiment to make, because then you can sell more of it. But now preservatives and things like that are things that people are, especially younger generations are like looking for the special types of bread that check all the boxes. And so now they have to move back to more natural ingredients, and then it stays fresh for even less time. So you have to be really on your game about making sure that you're rotating that stock so that the right bread gets sold at the right time and that you don't have any stale, because it's just a hit to the bakery's bottom line if they got a bunch of product that they're having you put out on the shelves, but you're not doing a good job of making sure that it's at the front so that it gets purchased.
Okay, because I know, like me, like I pick from the back anyway.
I know. There's plenty of people that ruin that anyway. Yeah, I do the same thing.
So you better come in every day and double check that bread, because if they're like me, I'm picking from the back.
Yeah, and some people do that, and sometimes it depends. That's the other thing. It depends on like the demographics in your area. There's some areas where it doesn't matter what you put on the shelf, whatever's at the front gets taken, and there's some where stale gets picked through and you're going to have a higher stale. So you have to kind of find ways to maybe move that stale to different stores or find, that don't get picked through. So that's part of kind of the nuance of it too.
Isn't there like a thing where the color of the twisty is like a different day or something like that?
Yeah. It's an easy shorthand that you can.
How does that work? Do you know that?
I don't know the exact colors.
Like green is one thing, white is another thing.
It's like an easier way for when you're putting it on the shelves to visually see which ones you need to rotate without having to actually find the stale or the expiration date on every single one of them.
What type of people are successful with this business model? Can you give me some use cases and just some, like someone who's maybe been able to scale to get to that multiple 15 plus routes, and they've been able to make this into actually a 7-figure business? Yeah.
So I think in general, there's a couple of things, and I think this applies to a lot of the spaces that we work in, but from the really successful people I've seen who scale in this too, one, there just has to be a certain amount of openness with uncomfortableness, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, because a lot of guys have been in the space for a long time, and change where you're adding a route or where you're adding another driver, it doesn't feel natural. You've got this down to a science where these bread spaces, like you've done the same thing for maybe 40 years. And so exactly how to do everything. So giving up any amount of control to somebody else that you've hired is just, that sounds like the craziest thing you could ever imagine. So part of it is that first step I often find is one of the hardest, of deciding to add a second route. And then I think actually the second and third route are two of the hardest routes to add, because at that point you're still fairly small in scale. You don't have enough time or you don't have enough scale for a manager yet.
Right.
So you might be hiring a couple of extra people, but you may be pulled out of the truck, or maybe you're still driving one of the routes and you got 2 routes over here that are going, but you don't have a manager yet. I've talked to a lot of people who they were like, a second route just about killed me. But once I got to 5, I was cruising. But I think one of the hardest things as you get more than what you can control, and like I said, this applies to basically all of the entrepreneurs I work with, is there's lots of people who see the goal of scale and size, and they even have the skills and the intention to get there, but it's the processes that you have to build and replicate and make sure that everybody's trained on and that you're inspecting what you expect, like moving forward, that I think a lot of people get lost in, because they may do some early training and bring the people in, but aren't thinking about making sure that those processes are still carried out and that everyone's doing the same things. And so you run into problems where if there's not a roadmap, then if somebody falls off over here, you don't notice it for a while, and by the time you notice, it's a big snowball that's rolling downhill, and you can't fix it. And at that point, you've got maybe 2 employees that have left, and you've got 3 routes, and it's just you.
Yeah.
So what I would say in the bread space in particular is a lot of the bakeries will provide a lot of support to help when you're struggling, which is a different thing than a lot of these other spaces we've worked in, where they will, you can ask them questions, you can ask for help, and they will, do their best. They're not viewing you as like, fix it or you're out. So there is a lot of support there, but I do think that you have to be really intentional in your strategy as you build and scale.
Got it.
To be successful here.
Who are the types of people that are coming into this space that you see? Where are they coming from?
All kinds of places for bread in particular, but for us, what we're seeing, I guess there's a dichotomy here. We sell some that are just one route. If it's just one route and you're coming in, we really want you to either be somebody who lives and can think of it as, if I had to, I would be in this route. I would be driving it. This could be a job. But we are already selling businesses that are multiple routes. So this isn't something where this is a business where you can buy a route and maybe one day you'll add a second one. Like, we are already selling packages of 3, 4, 5 or more. And as you come into those, you're already at the scale where you can buy a business. And so anybody who's coming in at that level, are a lot of times kind of the more corporate, I've been in the business for a while.
A little more advanced.
I've been in a business world for a while. I'm coming in with like business level acumen and adding it to this. But I'd say I see all kinds of people who are coming in on these one route ones, who, like I said, it can be as low as $5,000, $10,000 is what you need to get into one. We've got routes as low as $50,000 all the way up to some packages in the $600,000 ranges. But still, those are all, there's a big spectrum there. And because it's only about a 10% down payment, there is a lot of opportunity for just about anybody to come in and find a way to impact this space, especially because there's just so few moving parts. There's not a ton to learn, but we want to make sure to teach you all of it as you get into it.
Got it. And the people who are leaving this space, why are they leaving? Why are they selling?
There's always a certain number of people who are selling in all of these spaces, we find. It's just, retirement. I've done this for 50 years and my kids don't want it. I was planning on this to be a family business for the next 6 generations and nobody wants to do it anymore, so I'm selling. I'd say that there's less of, what we see a lot in the FedEx and Amazon space is a ton of kind of, the world's changing. There's tons of growth pressure. And so I don't want to keep up with it. There's less of that in the bread space, but I still see some of it. I still see that, we're moving again towards a model that I think the bread space has a potential to move towards where FedEx is, where we start to end up in the 5, 10, 15 route as a kind of a standard, which is, the average FedEx business is like 10 to 15 routes. So when we're looking at where the bread space is and where it can be, this is really getting in when you only have to buy one route and you can get up to a $1.5 million revenue business. But you get to grow it when it's still kind of that inflection point. But there's a lot of people that don't want that don't want to the kind of the dealing with the scale and the business acumen that comes from dealing with a larger size business. And so as they see kind of the tide turning in that direction, what bakeries want, that's not really where their objective is. So they see, hey, there's somebody young, new, who wants to come in and be successful here. That's not what I want. So I'll go ahead and get out.
Got it. How do you feel at this business?
It's actually pretty hard. A lot of the bakeries, there's even some bakeries that'll run the route for you if you've lost a driver or if you walk away and still pay you. Because like I said, depending on which contract you have, which bakery you have, some of them, you own that territory. And so they still need the product delivered, but you can even get paid on it. Now, I'd say that in general, bakeries are probably trying to move a contract model away from that. But the biggest way that you struggle is if you just either don't have a driver, so you're not delivering anything, or you commit fraud. There's people who do that too.
Really?
Try to do a bunch of
fraud. Like what? What do they do?
Work outside cash deals where the product is going to usually it's not to like the big box like Walmart. It's like a deli or somebody that they've worked out a cash operation and are either labeling it as shrink or as stale. And so they're saying the product disappeared, but really they're getting paid on it. And so there's people who've done things like that and got caught, obviously. But the bakeries really don't want you to fail and they'll work really hard to make sure you don't.
Got it. Man, that's people find a way to do anything in any industry.
I can't tell you. Yeah, I mean, the number of crazy things I've seen. So I started at Route Consultant as a salesperson, and the first FedEx deal they handed me, I had New York territory. I was Long Island, so I was like, okay, this is going to be great. And he's a friend of the business. It's going to be awesome. And so I'm showing these financials on this guy to like Wall Street investors who are looking to buy it because they're in the same area. They're in Long Island.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's this like $250K of auto expense? It's separate from repair and maintenance. I was like, oh, I don't know. I'll go ask the seller. I don't know anything. I just got here. And I go ask the seller, and he's like, oh yeah, that's where I pay my drivers under the table. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, no, hey, don't worry though. Everybody at the terminal does it. I'm like, that doesn't make it work. I got to sell this to a bank and a Wall Street investor. So I think there's a lot of that stuff all the time in any industry, but eventually you're going to get caught.
For sure.
Yeah.
How important is location?
If you're one route, very. I mean, if you have a driver, then sure, they can do it. You don't necessarily have to be there, but
in terms of profitability, I'm really asking for.
Yeah. So if it's one route and you're running it yourself, I think if you aren't if you're there, if you're running it yourself, you got to be there. It doesn't matter. Like, for sure. If you want the highest profitability on one route, I'm driving it myself, but it's a job. And so yes, it's a high margin and I'm building equity, but it's something where I'm investing a lot of time and I got to be here every day. But if you're not, are you talking about, absentee versus being in person? Or are you talking about location of the country?
Geographic location.
Okay. I would say there are definitely better and worse areas. In general, states that it's hard to do business in or more expensive to do business in. And there's been a lot of complications in like California around misclassification suits and things like that. There may not be as many opportunities in the bread space, but if you're really looking to find, population growth centers, and if you can find any way to get into an area where in 2 years or something, Publix is coming or a Walmart's coming, you're basically buying before it's there, and it's going to be a ton of free revenue that's added on automatically to your business. So if you can find any kind of up and coming population growth areas, there is a definite benefit to getting in there. It's not that everywhere's not going to be fine. In general, bread's growing across the board, and you're looking to every single brand out here has some kind of product that's trying to keep up with whatever fads. They're always working on something. So, if we're struggling in our basic bread, we've got Dave's Killer Bread or some kind of organic hybrid that will be, growing and everybody's going to be buying, because at the end of the day, basically everybody still needs and wants bread.
Right.
So that's what we always try to find when we look for new silos is if we're going to go into the space, we want to apply what we know. We want to go find a transportation last mile business, but also let's find something where it's recession proof, where at the end of the day, no matter what happens, people are going to buy bread. People are going to have their packages delivered. People are going to have trash, and people are going to go to the hospital. So, unfortunately, that's a fact of life. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about properly evaluating and like getting the proper valuations for these business. Because we talked about that earlier. You were saying people were like putting the wrong values on these business. So, what do these business sell for? What type of multiples, and how do you properly evaluate a bread route?
Yeah. So there's only so many cost line items. But one of the things that we're always looking at is making sure the biggest line item, if there is a payroll line item, is making sure that that's kind of an accurate number. Sometimes you will see people who really overpay their employees, or who, some of our routes for sale are actually from where there was a point in time where a bakery had to buy back some routes from their owners. And so they're running them corporately, but trying to sell them now to new investors. And they've got people in there who are running the routes, and, they're paying them whatever because they just need the routes run. And so part of when we're doing the valuation is making sure that we right size any expenses so that, based on what part of the country, we know what people should be getting paid. And so if you're planning on having a driver, we get that line item right. And then the bread space is typically a valuation based on weekly revenue. So we see ranges everywhere from like 10 to 25 times weekly revenue. And so it's a different multiple or a different valuation process than what we see in some of our other spaces where it's normally a multiple of net operating income. But that's just the way that Bread has been for a while. And I am actively working to change that, to make sure that we have better and better data on the net operating income where we can kind of change the way people think about it. So in a lot of our listings and valuations, we're putting that information in. But just right now, the way all sellers and buyers in this space think about it is a multiple of weekly revenue.
And you said you're trying to move away from that.
Yes, and I think that's a reflection of the kind of the way people think about this space. Is all that people think about is how much bread can I sell, but they don't think about how much money can I make.
I want to introduce to you guys the Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs Community, a powerful network built for transportation and logistics entrepreneurs by transportation and logistics entrepreneurs who really get it. Whether you're just getting started or looking to build, grow, and scale, TNHEC gives you the roadmap and resources to make it happen. From business planning to real industry connections, expert insights, and a support system that wants to see you win, we've got you covered. Nah, this isn't another Facebook group. This is Truck and Hustle's first ever official community, and it's designed for your success. So, if you're serious about growing your business in transportation and logistics, now is the time. Join the Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs community today, and let's build something special and amazing together. Let's go.
Which is, at the end of the day, you got to think about your expenses, how you're operating, how to be efficient. And so a lot of guys don't think about P&Ls. They don't think about their NOI. And so I think that's part of the change that we're trying to make is let's make NOI the standard as it is in basically any business valuation, because it also reflects the change that we're trying to get in the mentality between buyers and sellers of let's focus on how, at the end of the day, how much money we're making, not just how much bread I'm selling, but how much money am I actually taking home?
So how do you do that? How do you make that change? Because you have to have some sort of precedent, right?
Yeah, part of it is just having a bunch of routes for sale. So right now we've got over 100, 125 routes up for sale right now in basically every state in the country.
Okay.
And so
how many transact annually?
Across the country, I'd say part of it publicly, I'd probably say, 100, 200.
100, 200?
Yeah,
annually.
because there's a lot of private transactions that happen. So there's public brokerages, but there's who knows how many people who sell to their neighbor at the depot.
Right.
And you just never see it. But yeah, we have a bunch of routes up for sale right now that we've just secured over the last year or so. So part of what we're trying to do is, and we're already seeding it in the ways that we're putting out content, and the way that we're putting out our valuations, is show true NOI and show margins and start to think about how we do valuations around it. It's not going to be something where we just say, and now you evaluate with EBITDA and multiples of that. But it's something that we're hoping to continue to evolve that conversation around. And I think as more buyers come in that are business focused and are thinking about scale and growing in that way, that's what they're looking for anyway. And I think the reason we've been able to avoid it for a long time is both because, like I said, how the sellers think about it, but also because there's no banks. The bakeries are financing it. So banks ask for multiples and they ask for NOI, but the bakery is like, this is how much volume we're selling, so this is how much it costs.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys cater more to the buyer or to the seller?
I'd say we try to do 50-50.
But like in a case like this, if you have a bunch of inventory, you have to like kind of start looking for more buyers.
Yeah.
Right.
And we try to do both, but yeah, right now it's let's continue to help people understand what this space can be.
Yeah.
And the value that can come, not just from what it is today, but, we talked about margins, we talked about growing. So if you go from one route where, let's say, you're running it yourself, so it's going great and you're doing $80K, but you want to think about a business where you're growing and you're operating at scale and you're not in the route every day, your margins are going to come down as you put a driver in that route. But as you get up to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 routes, suddenly you're at the point where not only are your margins, 3, 4, 500K, but also you've built equity on this business so that at the end of the day, you can turn around at some point and sell it. So you're making a bunch of money for yourself, but also you've built a business that isn't just a job. This is something that operates without you having to be as a part of it every day, but also something that if you decide to move on and not pass it on to your kids, there's a really high value. And we're working to try to continue to increase what that value is worth. Because part of the way this business works is values will increase as more people come into the space. And the multiples that these sell at will continue to increase. So it's why I say, if you could have bought FedEx 20 years ago when you could get a route for, a 1 multiple, a 2 multiple, and now they're worth 4, 4.5.
At one point, weren't they giving away FedEx routes?
Exactly.
FedEx routes?
Yeah,
They were
exactly.
free.
So I mean, it's a lot of people came in for free.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The first original contractors were free.
Yeah. And so you think about people who got in and have grown it and changed with the times and now have, multi-million-dollar businesses that they can sell. Or keep and still make a bunch of money every year.
Yeah.
This is the same type of thing, and we're at that inflection point where bakeries and contractors are moving in that direction, and we are actively pushing the ship as well as fast as we can in that direction because we think it's the best thing for the space.
Got it. What type of tech is impacting the industry? Is AI having an impact? Is there any are they using tech on a regular basis? And if so, what type of tech is out there?
So there's not a lot yet that I would say is mainstream.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that are trying, there's a lot of people who have route optimization stuff in general that they're adding on to bread is a space they sell to, but there's all kinds of AI disruption that's going to happen to optimize ordering. And also on the route optimization side, like where knowing the right stops to make in the day, the right times to go there, the order of the stops. A lot of guys aren't using it. There are people who are, especially as they get into scale. That are, small efficiency increases will have a ton of impact on your bottom line over time. And there are small vendors that are getting into the space, but I would say that there's not one vendor that's everybody's using. Most people just use their handhelds that are provided by the bakery to do the ordering. And there's a website for most of them, but there's not a lot of technology here either.
Okay.
Yet. There should be.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm an investor, what type of questions should I be asking if I'm looking to purchase a route?
Yeah. How much does it cost? Which bakery is it? What's the commission rate at that bakery?
Okay.
One of the things too is understanding how sales work. So if
and break those down because I want to know why that's important. How much does it cost? We know that.
Yeah.
What bakery is it? Why is that important?
Yeah. So which bakery it is? One, that's going to factor in what products are sold. But two, those bakeries handle things like sales in different ways. So if they're going to be a buy one get one free, some bakeries you get paid as if they weren't on sale. Some bakeries, you only get 50% of the revenue because that's 50% off, so you only get paid 50%. So there's different little nuances there about how you're paid and what the day in, day out looks like. Like if you work for Mission, where you are selling, tortillas, you have to do a ton of volume because a lot of times you're just all of the tortillas are gone every day. So understanding the volume and how that affects what your day-to-day looks like is important. And we talk about bread, but there's also snacks, like grocery space as a whole. You could have a snack route that looks really different because they never expire, or they'll last for months. And so the financials and your day to day is going to change based on the products and the stores that you've got. So knowing the bakeries, but also knowing the stores is important. If you've got a territory that doesn't have any big box stores, so if they don't have any Walmarts, they don't have any Publix, they don't have any Krogers, none of that, unless you know that they're about to build a Walmart in your territory tomorrow, then you're missing that. It's probably not a territory that's going to be super lucrative. It may be okay, but they don't do the same kind of volume. They don't do the same kind of growth. So knowing what stops you have and which bakery it is are two of the biggest things. And then, like I always said, the payroll and what that drive. If you're keeping the driver that's there, you want to know everything about the driver. If you're not, then if you're coming in either doing it yourself or hiring your own person, you want to learn everything you can about what the seller knows, like that context that comes from being local and knowing what the clientele order and the nuances of ordering. You want to try to learn as much of that as you can from the seller before they're gone. Or ideally, we try to bake in, some kind of time period after the sale where they're still helping, still providing support.
Like a handoff kind of period.
Yeah, where you can still ask questions and still get some support on the ordering side, especially.
Now, do you guys help with that? Like as far as like the market research, like all those things just now kind of talked about. Is that where a route consultant would come in?
Yeah, so we have a few different ways we'll help there. So we can help buyers on the front end. Obviously, we can guide them through this entire process from beginning to end. So helping them get ready for the route, evaluate these routes, pass the interview, get all the way to stand up. We've got that's one of the ways we always help people. Is it's one of our services is always kind of the beginning to end. Let's make sure you find the right business, you pay the right price, and that you know everything you possibly can afterwards. And then we've got ways that we help people after close. We actually one of our salespeople on the bread side is still a bread contractor, and so we've tried to bring people in or have people that are connected with us that can be real-time mentors and operational support as well.
Okay. Got it. Now you talked about Killer Breads. What's going on with Killer Breads earlier? I know they just now passed $1 billion.
Yeah. I think it's so Dave's Killer Bread. I think it's just a great example of how sometimes you'll hear about problems in the bread space or that people aren't buying bread. It's more that people don't buy certain types of bread at certain times. The app I was talking about, but every bakery finds a way to find the product that is going to be successful because people want bread. They need it. It's just they want the products that make sense. So Dave's Killer Bread is a great example of one that's just exploding because it just checks the boxes on what consumers want. But it's also a good example of the fact that like you as a bread route operator are not having to do market research on how do I make the right kind of bread to match the clientele in my area? Those bakeries are all in on figuring it out and they're spending tons of time and tons of money. All you have to do is make sure that you get it on the shelves. And so I think that's one of the just points again to one of the big benefits of partnering with somebody like this. They're spending millions and billions of dollars to make this bread as attractive as it can be. All you got to do is get it on the shelves to go buy it.
Yeah. Is there any like data that you have around like the growth of the bread industry in general? Like so the trajectory?
The overall industry is over $35 billion and it's still growing at about 3 to 5% every year. So even though you don't think of bread as a huge booming industry, it is. It's still steady and they're still finding ways for it to grow every year. So this isn't something that's going away. And if anything, there's just more opportunity than there ever was.
Okay. Got it. And then along the way, when you're working with people, like, is there like touch points where you guys will kind of check back in with the purchaser and just kind of see how they're doing? Is there continued education? Kind of tell us about how that works.
Yeah. So we always try to stay connected to people after they close. The other thing is that we do live events and always are going to invite anybody back. And all of our events are free. So we also like our big event is our expo. It's coming up in January in Nashville. So if you want to come back to Nashville,
I'd love to be there. I haven't been yet, but I've been invited a couple times. I think I'm going to maybe come this time. Man.
Yeah. And we focus a little bit on each of those industries. And so that's a good place for us to reconnect with people because, I'm not going around to every state in the country to check in but we'll do touch points. We'll do emails, we'll do calls, especially if you were working with us as a client. We always are going to check back in every 3 to 6 months to make sure that what you got is what you expected. That's both important for us to make sure that we told you the right things for future and also to make sure that if there are things that we could have done better in the process that we're always learning. But in general, I find that most people, and this is our goal, is that you come to us and you work with us and we do, as much as we can to make sure that you feel as comfortable as you can and that you pay the right price for a business when you get in. So that ultimately, whenever you have questions or problems, we try to stand in as someone who can provide that answer. And then at the end of the day, 5-10 years from now, if you decide to sell, you come back and we see you again. And that happens all the time.
Yeah. What are some of the big misconceptions of bread routes? Like, let's pretend that like we're reading the comment section right now.
Yeah.
And the things that people, we know they'll say, those routes suck. You can't make any money, this, that, and the third. Like, what are some of those misconceptions that you hear a lot? And then what's your response to some of those misconceptions?
Yeah. I think a big one we've already talked about is that it can only be one route. It has to be a job. And I think it's just the way it's been for a long time. And so you're not wrong that this is a business where you have to be, somebody has to be there, somebody has to be working hard. But this is a business that there is the opportunity to build a back end and to scale so that it doesn't have to be. There's plenty of people who can come in and treat this as a job and work really hard and do it themselves. That's fine. Like, you're going to do a good job and you're going to do well, but there's just so much opportunity. And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I just think it's the kind of a culture and a tradition and an expectation that's been put on the community, where there's just hasn't been a lot of people helping to open the door. And I think in some places the doors even were closed, but I think we're at a time now where the bakeries are wanting this and we're trying to work to build paths to get there. So that's always the first misconception, is that, this is only a job, thanks for telling me about bread, but why would I care? I can't make any money. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think the other thing, that's for sure the biggest one.
Okay.
And in general, that it's, there's no way to build this where you can't be remote and absentee. But I know plenty of people that I've talked to who are 10, 15 route contractors that haven't driven in years.
Yeah. And I've seen that side too. I've
Yeah.
seen some comments say, hey, my uncle and wherever owns a bread route and he's killing it.
Yeah.
So, I think some people are just lazy. They don't want to do the work, man. They just see things and they want something for nothing a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, and everybody has a different experience because everybody's a different operator. And, just because I have one, just because things work out for me one way, don't mean it'll work out for you the same way,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yeah. It's being an entrepreneur is hard, like we've said, and there are so many paths that your journey can take. And just because something was easy for the last owner doesn't mean it'll be easy for you. But we try to create an apples to apples, as clear of a path as we can for what success looks like, and help you get there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm watching this video right now. I have like 50K in the bank.
Yeah.
I want to start a business. I don't come from a transportation background. I want to connect with you guys. This looks like an opportunity. Give me an idea what my life could look like in the next year or two if I purchase a bread route.
Yeah. So first off, if you reach out to us, you can go to our site and you can see every listing. If you just want to click on routeconsultant.com, and you can click on any listing and we'll send you the details. But this is not a super slow process. So if you decide that you're interested and you want to jump on one of these, 3 months, you could be up and running.
Okay.
50,000, there's all kinds of opportunities there in terms of the routes that you'll have access to. In the first year, it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of, am I doing this myself, or if I have a driver, am I making sure they're doing a good job? But I know people who have, after a year at a route, what it'll depend on is how you decide to add routes, is in terms of what it'll look like in the next 5 years. So if you're purely basing it off of growth, like if you're just organic growth, if you don't have any big changes coming to your territory, you're probably not going to just immediately add a route, because adding a route means you've got enough volume for 2 people to be delivering in those zip codes. But if you're incrementally purchasing additional routes, which is what a lot of people do, and like I said, there's a lot of the private kind of transactions that happen. So you get into the depot, you make friends with everybody, and you figure out, okay, which of these guys is on their way, their last leg, and which of them can I go make a deal with? Because that's how a lot of people make those. If they're in the growth mindset and the growth phase, they come in and they find the people who aren't at the depot, and they say, hey, look, it looks like you're having a rough time. I'll give you X, which is probably 75% of what it's worth, but it takes out all the hardships of trying to put up a route and deal with whatever that might entail.
Yeah.
That's an uncertainty. And then you go in and you can find the route and you can make those transactions and get a good price on it. That's how a lot of people grow quickly, is you do those types of transactions, or you can just buy them directly. But if you're adding on, you can grow as fast as you want to if you're just buying them one at a time or buying a larger package. And that's really the main way that you're growing, is those kind of incremental purchases as you're ready, or if you've got a territory that they threw up a Walmart and suddenly your volume's gotten big enough where you need to add somebody.
Got it. So if I'm not that ambitious and I just kind of keep my route, what does life look like for me?
Yeah. If you just keep what you got, then there's going to be some organic growth every year, and you're just going to you can keep kind of the pie that you own. You own that pie. It'll get a little bit bigger every year. You can treat that as kind of, whether you're kind of absentee, you've got a driver, and so it's an amount of money that just you make every year and it just sits in the bank and isn't something you look at, or maybe you have to buy a new truck every few years. It's really probably every like 10 years in the space, but, or you're driving it yourself and it's your job and it's your, you're running this and you're making all the money and that's your full day, but it's not going to change a lot year over year unless you want it to. And I think that's the interesting thing about this space is you got a lot of control over the revenue and your opportunities to find new stops and new ways to sell more in a store if you make the right relationships, or you can keep it exactly the same. Like there's people who, like I said, they built this, they know it by heart, they've run it for the last 40 years and they're planning on passing it to their kids. And if they don't want to change, if that's the amount of money that you want to make, nothing's really going to stop you from making it.
Yeah. Do you guys help with the facilitation of the equipment, like the trucks and stuff like that?
Yeah. So we've got both partners that we can introduce you to, and then we've got, we're always doing new things. So we've got a side part of the business as well that's a truck leasing company, and so there's ways we can help there as well, whether it's used or new vehicles, because it's the same types of step fans that we use on the FedEx side. So we've got that arm of the business, but we will do whatever we need to make sure you can find a vehicle at the right price.
Do most people like buy the truck outright, or do you see them leasing, or what's the typical owner do?
Yeah, it's a mix. I'd say a lot of people buy used and, or finance it. They not even buy it outright, but still finance used, because there's not a lot of requirements for what the vehicle is in terms of, what model type it is, as long as you can hold all the bread, and they don't do a ton of mileage. You don't get many accidents because you're out on the road from, 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. and there's just not a lot of people driving at those hours. You're not doing a lot of interstate miles. So trucks don't, the guy who works for us, who's a bread contractor, he has like 3 routes and hasn't had an accident in years, knock on wood for that guy. But for sure. But there's not a ton of wear and tear, so you can really keep those vehicles going for a long time. So you can buy new if you want, but it doesn't really make sense most of the time because you don't really need a warranty. There's not that much of a risk there, so it's just cheaper to get used.
And how much do those trucks traditionally cost?
So if you buy new, it's like $75 right now, but that's not what people are paying. So, like we're talking like 20, 25.
Okay.
And like I said, most people probably aren't buying those outright. They're financing a used vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good deal, man. Well, I think we covered a ton of stuff. Did I miss anything?
I think as far as bread goes, that's about all the
I think we
pieces.
covered all the bread, man, all the bread. So this industry, I like what you said earlier about like kind of like if you would have purchased a FedEx route, or if you would have had the opportunity to buy one 10, 20 years ago, look at what it would be worth today, right? Because those transactions are happening all the time, and they can be for a lot of money. Millions of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, we do over $100 million every year in FedEx transactions. So
100%. So this can potentially be the new thing. I mean, like you said, bread isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And man, the delivery of bread isn't going anywhere.
Yeah. People think about it, bread doesn't feel like a disruptor or like a new sexy industry, but if you're making 50% margins and you can grow this to be a multi-million-dollar business, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But for, I think probably the last time we talked about this, we didn't have a lot of opportunities for sale, but now it doesn't matter where you are in the country. If you're interested, we'll get you started.
Yeah. I love it. All right, man. Yeah, I think we kind of covered it, man. So before we go, 2 things. Number 1, let everybody know where they can connect with you directly and where they can learn more about the bread routes at Route Consultant.
Yeah.
And then we have to leave with our final thought, man. And that's just some inspiration for the entrepreneurs and the people out there, and maybe someone who's considering buying a route.
Yeah. So where you can find me, routeconsultant.com is the easiest. But you can reach me on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Josh at routeconsultant.com is my email. So as easy as that.
Hit him up.
It's one of the nice things about being here early is I don't have to use my last name. I still just have Josh and no one's taking it from me. So, but yeah, inspiration. I mean, I have worked with, hundreds of entrepreneurs in this space and, all these different spaces. And I think there's so many, it's like we've talked about, it can be so hard to be an entrepreneur, and there's so many ways to fail. But what I think I've seen, and it's kind of what I mentioned earlier too, is if you come in any of these spaces that we deal with, if you come in with the right goal in mind and build the right strategy, anyone can be successful. Like, you asked who's successful. You don't have to have transportation experience. It's nice if you do. But man, I have seen people who have no idea what they're doing when they first talk to us, don't have that much money. And, we try to not write people off who don't check all the initial boxes we think of. But there's some people, I know so many people who've come in, taken the time to learn what the business is, to be successful, and really listen to the things we teach. And that's often all it takes to really be successful here. And then to focus on replicating everything that they've built and making sure that they continue those processes. And man, these are spaces that are designed for you to be successful if you just learn the right strategies. And you can be someone who builds generational wealth in any of these. And it is just about following the roadmap.
100% turnkey business, right? Mm-hmm. Get in there, follow the roadmap, and hopefully make some money.
Yeah.
All right, Hustle Fam, you know what we do around this time. If you smell something, burn this only a desire. This has been another amazing episode. Josh, man, thank you so much for coming in all the way from Nashville, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Next time I'm out there, I'm definitely going to stop by the office and check you guys out.
Yeah, hopefully
and
I'll see you in January.
Hope to be at the summit. Where is it at?
It's at the Music City Convention Center downtown. So we will spill right out onto the streets of Broadway after it's over. So it'll be a good time.
Okay, and you can learn more about that at routeconsultant.com.
Routeconsultant.com.
That's not consultants, that's consultant.
I appreciate that. Yes.
NT.com.
Yes.
Routeconsultant.com. Check them out. Josh Gregory, the vice president, man. Thank you so much, sir. It's been an amazing time talking to you.
It's been great.
All right, man. Hustle fam, we are out.
All right, y'all. Listen, I'm happy to announce that we finally launched our YouTube memberships. Listen, if you want to support Truck and Hustle for all the hard work that we've been doing over the past 5 years, this is where you need to be. As a part of our memberships, number one, you'll get exclusive access to all of our archive content. Number two, we'll be doing at least one live webinar with one of the guests or somebody else from our network that you love to continue to add value to you and your business. Third, we'll be having exclusive behind the scenes content that we shoot and doesn't, make the final cut. So make sure you go check it out. Get that subscription right now and join us, man. TNH forever. Let's go. All right, guys, if you love Truck and Hustle and you love the interviews and the information that we're providing week to week, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. All right, Hustle fam.